My name's Julian Parker. I run a business restoring cars, but my real passion is early transport. And one of those elements is cycles. What I'm going to do is a series of relatively short, but a bit more technical videos to talk about particular items. Today I want to talk about this lever operated bicycle, but we'll cover things like bicycle lamps, we'll cover cars, we'll cover motorcycles, anything really that I find of interest that's really around the sort of turn of the century. So the bicycle I would like to talk about today is this. It's called, this model is the Alert. It was made by the New Cycle Company in London. And it's extremely rare and quite interesting when you sort of understand a bit more about it. So it started off, the Swedish company called Svea, they designed this lever operation, and the idea was they felt it was a better position to have your feet in, and it enabled you to gear the back end. That's very much sort of kept and stayed within Sweden. It didn't really move much out of it. And then Alfred Nobel, he of Dynamite and Peace Prizes, created this company, the New Cycle Company in London, to bring ultimately what was a Swedish design, although this was made in England, I believe, to England. They were incorporated in 1894, and I think this model here is about 1896. Now in 1896, it was the height, the absolute height of the cycle boom in Britain. And at that point, the bicycle had gone from the early velocipede through a penny farthing into a safety bicycle. So the frame and the design generally had been resolved. What they were struggling was gearing. So everybody was trying to come up with something that gave you a mechanical advantage or gave you a section of different gears. So you had people like Pedersen, Mikael Pedersen, who had this extraordinary sort of triangulated frame. He designed his own gearbox, which was literally a tiny gearbox. It was a proper gearbox, like a mini car gearbox. So it had a lay shaft and all the bits you'd expect inside it. Sturmey Archer, again, trying to create a gearbox. They were limited to, it's an epicyclic gearbox, mainly 2 gears at that stage. The Simpson chain. Simpson believed, it was a French design, they came to this country, that if they drove off the outside of the chain and the inside, you got extra mechanical advantage, you had more leverage. And all of these things came together in this point of around 1895. So it's a pivotal point really in the development of the bicycle gearing. Now what these guys came up with was in effect a very standardised bicycle frame, nothing particularly interesting in the frame design itself. But the really fascinating part, of course, is the lever design and the way it works. So if I run through the basics of how it works, and then I'll try to explain how the gearing on it works. So in effect, you've got a lever that's operated, pushed down on a pedal. The reverse side of the crank here comes back, and the chain, if you see the chain not as a geared chain that sits on a sprocket, it's almost like a tether that sits to a freewheel hub at this side, and you have exactly the same on the other side. So you have a freewheel hub there and a freewheel hub there, so I can spin the wheel forwards without the chains moving at all. But to link this pedal with this pedal, this crank with this crank, this chain here tethered one side round a gear here and then went back and picked up the other side. So as I operate these pedals, you can see the link chain between the two going to and fro, if that's sort of making sense. It's bonkersly complicated, and I'm not sure it ever worked particularly well, but they believed in it. Terra, the French company, made this design afterwards. So this is how it's working. Now, if you look at the rear end, this is very interesting, because what they've done here, these sprockets, it's further away here, so they've tried to remove the sprocket. So in effect, the sweet point of pushing it down with your leg, at this stage, as you're pushing it, they're trying to give you the biggest mechanical advantage by pushing this out and then bringing it back in when you get to the end of the stroke, and then the other pedal does it. So it's so complicated, and it gets more complicated the more I explain what they were trying to do. This is their idea. So this at this stage has no gearing. It's simply driving it with what was considered to be a more efficient form of driving it, plus a cam in effect on the rear sprocket to give you what appeared to be more gearing. Their genius, and I use that word slightly carefully, was to enable this chain to sit into different positions on here. So clearly, the closer it is to the gear, so if I change that one over as well, you're now spinning a much smaller gear. And if you go through the gear on this thing, you've actually got from a 40-inch wheel to a 120-inch wheel in the gearing ratios as you go between this. So that can then change to this point here and this point here. Now, where they got extraordinarily optimistic, I guess, most people had cables or levers or something like that to operate this. Terreau French company, took over the design, and whether they bought the patent or not, or made them under license, I don't know, but they were made a little time after that, so very early the following century, 1900, 1902, 03, and they had two like gates on a slider here that changed it. So there was a mechanical device from the handlebar through a Bowden cable that enabled these gates to be lifted up and down and changed like that. Not so for these guys. They went to pneumatics. So they thought compressed air was the way to do it. Now, honestly, I have never seen this before. I have no idea whether it ever worked, but they did it. Svea did it. I have seen, this is the only bike of this make in this country that I have ever seen. I've never seen another one. So I can't tell you whether it ever did work. But up here on the handlebars are two little buttons that you've probably seen. Now these buttons can be pushed, well that's a bit stiff, can be pushed in and out. And inside this round sphere here is a little bladder that pushes compressed air down along here and round here, and it goes into a tube here that runs down the down tube. Now if you come really close in here, you can see one of the tubes pops out there, the other one is broken off. So this is the compressed air tube that took the rubber tube, and that rubber tube there went up through this tiny little round bezel there. And then behind here, from what I can work out, was another bladder to receive the air that was pushed down from this pump. And by putting additional pressure onto a rocking ratchet mechanism here, it made it, as you went through it made it climb and descend. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember a tin toy which was a wind-up mechanical monkey that had the same device of a rocking sort of spigot that would climb a post by itself. And as far as I can understand, that is the principle that they were using to change gear. So in this bicycle, we have something that is extreme, I find it fascinating, really, really interesting. You've got three chains, three separate designs of chains. So you've got a standard bicycle chain, then you've got one with these drop down side plates to hold onto the rear gear, and then you've got one with a toothed side plate to stop it dropping off this gear here. So you have three separate types of chain and three individual chains that are all linked into the various components of this. And that just makes the wheel move. You've got two freewheel mechanisms on both sides of the hub, and then you've got this mechanical change that is operated by pneumatics. I got this a little while ago from some guy, and I had never seen the likes of it in my life. And I've seen a lot of bikes, but this one just blew my mind. I think I probably is the rarest bike I think I've ever probably owned, and one of the rarest bikes I think I've ever seen. So that is it. I mean, that's all I can tell you about the Alert bicycle. Grand idea. Company did go bust in '98, I think. There was something I read about it being rebranded, and it was either made in Northfleet in Kent, or it was called the Northfleet. I'm not sure. There's really so little information about this because it is rare, and I think it's rare because it probably didn't work very well. But as far as a historical piece, it is exceptional. All we've done is make the display base for it, which is the white base, made this to hold it up so that we can pedal it. Very carefully cleaned it and tried to preserve it exactly as it is. So it's got the original, I believe that's the original front tyre. It's had a replacement rear tyre, but excuse me, I'm just coming around this side. This here is a repair that's gone tatty and very old. But at the very back of this, you can just see a leather patch in here and some staples where someone's tried to repair this, and they look like they put it over another tyre underneath it. I don't want to disturb it because it's too important. So a really, really important bicycle, extraordinarily important, amazingly rare, in phenomenal original condition, and a real early piece of cycling history when we were trying to crack, when they were trying to crack the gearing issue that we don't think about twice when you jump onto your thing with derailleurs and stuff. But that's at the beginning, that's where it all started. So stay tuned to other videos. I'll cover all sorts of different subjects. I hope you enjoyed it. Any comments, please get back to me. If you know any more about it, again, get back to me. But that's what we're talking about today, the Alert cycle.